our products take a lot longer to produce that MVP, or kind of actually a lot of what we're aiming for is like a fundable prototype. But what do you think is a good way to, you only have, say, one unit, and it's a precious, precious unit, and you're debating features on cost versus these political decisions. How would you kind of approach that problem of figuring out cost versus hypotheticals?
Yeah, totally. I mean, my goal would be to sell like, too many hardware startups that I meet with have amazing prototypes that they won't give to customers. They're too precious for customers to have them. But like, the founders get to use them every day. It just offends me. It's like, oh, they're good enough for you, but not good enough for your customers. And like, no, because like, what's really going on is they're not good enough for my ego. It doesn't look pretty enough, and I can't bear for a customer to see it. You know, like that's like, it's a very selfish thing, actually. So what I would like to do is to sell those products to somebody. First of all, because they might say no, and then your precious prototype can stay in the lab just where you like it, but you learn something really valuable. Like, I'll tell you a funny story. I was working for an appliance startup, building a new consumer appliance, and they, I'll never forget this. I was talking to them about the possibility of selling their early prototypes, and they were just like, no, it can't be done. No. They were really, really nervous about it, and I finally was like, it's impossible. It's too hard. They had all these reasons why it couldn't happen, and how long it was going to take. I was like, well, hold on. And at a certain point, I was like, time out. You guys are describing this appliance to me in great detail. Have you actually built one? And they're like, well, of course, there's one. We have a prototype, but we're using for, to do all kinds of regulatory compliance and all kinds of testing on. So you have this appliance in your office right now. And I'm like, uh-huh. And I was like, is there a store that sells these appliances in your city? They were in a city I didn't know well. And they're like, well, actually, we're part of a corporate network. Anyway, there's a model showroom that sells these kinds of appliances that our company, through an affiliate owns. And I'm like, oh, where is that? They're like, oh, it's in our office. I was like, how many feet between your office where you work every day and this showroom? And they were like, oh, it's like 100 yards away. And I'm like, okay, call me crazy. Do you guys think it would be physically possible to pick up this appliance and walk it 100 yards to the showroom and offer it for sale? And they were like, I can't suggest such a thing. Like, to them, it was like mind blown. I was like, look, it seems pretty straightforward. You were able to build this one. It's like, if somebody buys it, you can build another one with the money that they paid you, maybe, could that? And they were like, but for people who have been trained in mass production, the idea of selling one unit is so absurd. It was like I had suggested to them, if they found a quarter on the street, it'd improve the company's balance sheet. Like, what's the point of selling one? They want to sell 1 million of these a year. Selling one is doesn't matter. I was like, well, but if you can't sell that one, which in fact is what happened. I love being this kind of consultant, because it's extremely rare that things work out great with the first experiment. It's so unlikely. I'm sure you're right. So I get to come in and be like, you guys are geniuses. I'm sure everything you're right. You're going to put this thing in there, and the customer's going to buy it too quickly and pay you too much money for it, and it's going to be awful, because then you have to go support this thing. It's going to be terrible. But let's go double check, just to be sure. And it's like, you all laugh, but how many of you are selling your prototype right this second? No show of hands required. But yeah, so but that's really that's what I would want. Some people are like, well, I can't afford to produce multiple prototypes, or I can't just produce a new one after the old one. In that case, I would want to say, well, it's a very big difference if you can produce one versus two. A lot of people think about, well, I can't produce 10, but sometimes you can produce 2. And I've worked with a number of companies where the deal they have with customers is there's 2 prototypes that exist at any given time. One's in the customer's hands and one's in our hands. And we just swap. Every 2 weeks we swap. And then we make sure the customer likes the new one better than the old one, and we bring the old one, during whatever the period is, we improve the one that's in our lab to bring it up to specs and make it better. And the thing that those techniques, and there's a bunch of techniques, so depending on the specific situation of well, exactly how expensive is it to produce a prototype, exactly what is the production situation, there's a lot of different techniques, but the basic idea is, how long is this program? How long are people on Highway 1? They're
16 weeks.
16 weeks.
And we're on, week 9, week 10?
Yeah, oh, great. So you guys have been busy making your products better this whole time, am I right? So here's a really annoying question. How do you know that the product is better today than it was 10 weeks ago? Most people I ask this question to are offended that I would even suggest such a thing. Well, look, just look at it. But first of all, a hardware problem, I can't tell. I certainly don't know. And Marcus can attest how many designers I've worked with over the years where they're like, look, it's more beautiful. I'm like, I don't care. What does your customer care that it's more beautiful? Does your customer even agree that it's more beautiful? And this is the really uncomfortable truth of entrepreneurship. unlike in most of the jobs that most people have in this world, in entrepreneurship, if you don't know who the customer is, you literally don't know what quality means. So you say you're making the product better, but I beg to differ. I say in most cases, at best, you just don't know. You might have, it's 50-50 odds, you might have made it better or you might have made it worse. And that is really, really frustrating. Most jobs, if you do diligent work, things get better. That's just the deal you made with management. But you are management. There's no one to make the deal with. Brady can't promise you. No one can promise you. Like, it's just between you and your customers. So unless you really understand what the customer desires, it's very easy to trick yourself into doing work that you think is important that actually adds no value. And it's extremely frustrating. So frustrating that most people don't just want to pretend this isn't happening and like lock themselves back in the cave and just keep cranking on the thing, and it makes them feel better. But again, like, is this about your ego or is this about delivering results for your customers? Like that, something we got to think about.